With an IQ of 152, you could be running companies, not teaching children their ABCs. I'd heard variations of this statement from my father throughout my life, but this time was different. This time, Harrison Bennett wasn't just expressing disappointment in his daughter's career choice. He was cutting me off completely. I'm Alexandra Bennett, Alex to my friends, and at 28, I'd finally done the unthinkable. I'd accepted a position as a high school teacher instead of joining Bennett Technologies, my family's thriving tech company. The mahogany-paneled walls of my father's home office seemed to close in as he paced behind his desk, his custom Italian loafers wearing a path in the Persian carpet. My mother, Catherine, sat perfectly poised in her designer armchair, her expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. "Alexandra, darling," she said, her voice dripping with practiced patience, "you have to understand how this looks. We've invested everything in your education. The best private schools, Harvard Business School, leadership training, and now you want to throw it all away to teach teenagers." I straightened my spine, feeling the weight of my teaching credentials in my bag. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm using my education exactly how I want to use it. How you want? Dad's voice rose as he spun to face me. What about what this family needs? The company needs. Your brother James is handling the technical side, but we need you for operations and strategy. It was all planned out. Ah, yes, the plan. The grand Bennett dynasty blueprint that had been laid out since before I was born. James would handle the engineering and product development, following in Dad's footsteps, while I would manage operations and eventually become CEO, inheriting Mom's role. Perfect symmetry, perfect succession. Except I had my own plans. Dad, I've taught coding workshops for 3 years alongside my MBA. I've seen the impact direct education can have. The excitement when a student finally grasps a concept, the potential unleashed when. Potential? He slammed his hand on the desk, making the family photos rattle. You want to talk about potential? Bennett Technologies is about to sign the largest government contract in our history. We're talking billions in educational technology infrastructure. That's real impact. I knew about the contract. The A-Tech initiative, a massive project to modernize the entire state's educational technology infrastructure. Bennett Technologies was the frontrunner, but they still needed approval from the State Department of Education. And who do you think evaluates and implements these education contracts? I asked quietly. Teachers, education professionals, people who understand both technology and classroom realities. Don't get smart with me, Dad snapped. If you want to understand how technology works in education, you do it from the corporate side, not by grading papers and chaperoning proms. Mom stood up, smoothing her silk blouse. Alexandra, we're just trying to protect you. Teaching is admirable, but the salary, the status, she shuddered delicately. How will you maintain your lifestyle? I looked around the office, at the symbols of wealth that had defined my upbringing. The rare art pieces, the antique furniture, the photos of our family at charity galas and yacht club events. Maybe I don't want that lifestyle. The words hung in the air like a death knell. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. Then you won't have it. As of this moment, you're cut off. No more trust fund, no more allowance, no more family connections. If you want to live like a teacher, you'll do it without our support. Harrison, Mom gasped, though I noticed she made no move to contradict him. You have a choice, Alexandra, Dad continued, his voice cold. Take your rightful place at Bennett Technologies, or face the consequences of your idealism. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady my legs felt. I've already made my choice. I start at Franklin High School next month. Then I suggest you start learning to live on a teacher's salary immediately. He turned his back to me. A clear dismissal. Madeline will show you out. Mom gave me one last pleading look but remained silent as I walked out of the office. The housekeeper, Madeline, was waiting in the hallway, my coat already in her hands. She'd worked for our family for 20 years, had practically raised me while my parents built their empire. "Miss Alexandra," she whispered, slipping something into my pocket as she helped me with my coat. "You'll always have friends here." Outside, the autumn air was crisp as I walked to my car, a modest Prius I'd bought myself, much to my parents' horror. Inside my pocket, I found a folded envelope containing $2,000 in cash and a note in Madeline's careful handwriting. "For emergencies. Proud of you." I drove home to my new apartment, also modest, also self-funded, fighting back tears. Not of sadness, but of determination. My parents thought teaching was beneath me, a waste of potential. They had no idea that I was about to have more influence over their precious contract than they could imagine. Because what my family didn't know was that I hadn't just accepted any teaching position. Through my work with coding workshops and educational outreach, I had caught the attention of some very important people in the state's education department. People who were looking for someone with both educational experience and a deep understanding of technology infrastructure. My position at Franklin High was only part of my new role. The other part, the part I couldn't tell my parents about due to confidentiality agreements, was as special advisory chair to the State Education Technology Implementation Committee. In other words, I would be one of the key people evaluating and approving that billion-dollar contract my father was so excited about. But that would be a lesson for another day. Right now, I had curriculum planning to do and a classroom to prepare. After all, as any good teacher knows, the best revelations come after proper preparation. I pulled into my apartment complex, passing the gleaming high-rises where I used to live to reach my more humble building. A text from James lit up my phone. "They'll come around, Lex. They always do." I smiled sadly. My brother meant well, but he didn't understand. This wasn't about them coming around. It was about standing my ground, about proving that success isn't measured by the size of your office or the number of zeros in your bank account. Sometimes the most important lessons are the ones that hurt the most to teach, and I was about to give my parents an education they'd never forget. The first month of teaching at Franklin High School taught me more about leadership than any Harvard Business School course ever did. Standing in front of 30 teenagers, trying to make computer science both accessible and engaging, required skills that couldn't be learned from textbooks or board meetings. Miss Bennett, Maria Rodriguez, one of my brightest students, raised her hand during our coding workshop. Why do schools always get stuck with outdated technology? My cousin's private school has all the latest equipment, but here we're working with computers older than we are. The question hit close to home. The very contract my father was pursuing was meant to address this disparity, but I knew Bennett Technologies' proposal focused more on profit margins than educational equity. "That's actually a complex issue," I began, seeing an opportunity for a real-world lesson. Who here knows anything about educational technology procurement? Blank faces stared back at me. Okay, let's break it down. When schools need technology, they have to go through a whole process. I started sketching on the whiteboard, creating a flowchart of the procurement process. By the end of class, my students understood more about educational infrastructure than most corporate executives I knew. After school, I headed to my other office, a sleek space in the State Education Department building downtown. As Special Advisory Chair, I had the responsibility of reviewing all major technology implementation proposals for the state's schools. "Alex, you need to see this," Sarah Martinez, my deputy, said it as I walked in. She handed me a thick folder with the Bennett Technologies logo emblazoned on it. Their final proposal just came in. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing the document, my heart sinking with each page. The technology was cutting edge, yes, but the implementation plan was clearly designed to maximize profit rather than educational impact. Schools would be locked into expensive service contracts, forced to upgrade on the company's schedule rather than their own, and smaller districts would receive lower priority support. "They don't understand how schools actually work," I muttered, making notes in the margins. "This would bankrupt half our districts within 5 years." "Speaking of not understanding," Sarah said, handing me a newspaper. "You might want to see this." It was the business section of the city paper. There, smiling from a photo, were my parents at a charity gala. The headline read, "Bennett Technologies, set to revolutionize state education." The article quoted my father, "Our company understands education better than anyone. This contract will transform how our children learn." I was still staring at the article when my phone buzzed. A text from my brother James. "Dad's planning a big announcement dinner next week. They're so confident about the contract. They're already celebrating. Maybe you should come? Try to patch things up." Before I could respond, another message came through, this one from the family group chat I was still part of, though no one had addressed me directly in weeks. "Mom's celebration dinner next Thursday at Le Cirque. Black tie. Harrison has a major announcement. Dad, time to show everyone what the Bennett family can achieve in education. Would be nice if ALL family members could demonstrate such commitment to educational excellence." The passive-aggressive dig wasn't subtle. I switched back to James's private message. "They're inviting the whole board, major shareholders, even the press. Dad's convinced the contract is a done deal. Says their inside sources at the education department confirmed it's just a formality at this point." I felt a chill. Inside sources? I knew there had been rumors of Bennett Technologies trying to influence department officials. This would need investigation. The next week was a blur of activity. By day, I taught my students, working with outdated equipment, but seeing their enthusiasm for learning shine through regardless. By night, I pored over contract proposals, meeting with other committee members, and building a case for what our schools really needed. I also did something I'd never done before. I started documenting every interaction, every email, every piece of evidence suggesting Bennett Technologies was trying to manipulate the contract process. If they were playing dirty, they needed to be exposed. 2 days before the celebration dinner, I received an official invitation. Not from my parents, but from Bennett Technologies' PR department. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Bennett Technologies' groundbreaking achievement in educational technology. As a professional educator, your presence would add valuable perspective to this historic moment." They didn't even realize who I was. To them, I was just another teacher to be used as a prop in their corporate theater. I RSVP'd yes. That same afternoon, I finished my final review of their proposal. The verdict was clear. While their technology was impressive, their implementation plan would be disastrous for our schools. The contract couldn't be approved as written. I also finished compiling my evidence of their attempted contract manipulation. The file was damning. Emails showing improper contact with department officials evidence of attempted bribes, documentation of false claims in their proposal. As I prepared for the celebration dinner, I thought about Maria's question about outdated computers, about all the students in underfunded schools who deserved better, about the difference between looking successful and actually making a difference. My parents thought they were about to teach me a lesson about success. Instead, they were about to learn one about integrity. I slipped my presentation materials and documentation into my bag, along with my Department of Education credentials. Tomorrow night, at their own celebration dinner, they would finally understand exactly what just a teacher could do. The stage was set for a lesson they'd never forget. And this time, I would be the one doing the teaching. Lee Sirk's private dining room sparkled with crystal and success. The city's business elite mingled over champagne, celebrating a victory not yet officially won. My father stood at the center of it all, holding court like a king in his empire. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress that would have made my mother wince if she recognized me at all. For the first 20 minutes, I moved through the crowd unnoticed, just another teacher invited for show. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed across the room. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to celebrate not just a contract, but a vision. Bennett Technologies is about to revolutionize education across our state. Applause rippled through the room. I watched my mother beam with pride, my brother James shift uncomfortably. He'd always been more honest than our parents. And the board members nod in self-satisfaction. In just a few days, Dad continued, we'll be signing the largest educational technology contract in state history. Our inside sources tell us it's a done deal. More applause. And to demonstrate our commitment to educators, we've invited several teachers to join us tonight. These are the people who will be using our technology, shaping young minds. His voice trailed off as he finally spotted me in the crowd. The color drained from his face. Alexandra? Hello, Dad, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't let me interrupt. You were saying something about inside sources and done deals. Mom's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. James took a step forward, then thought better of it. What are you doing here? Dad's attempt at a smile looked more like a grimace. I was invited. I held up the PR department's invitation. As a professional educator, though I'm actually here in my other capacity, I reached into my bag and pulled out my credentials. As Special Advisory Chair of the State Education Technology Implementation Committee. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. I could see the wheels turning in every head as they processed what this meant. That's impossible, Mom finally managed. Why? Because I'm just a teacher. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Actually, that's exactly why I was chosen for the role. They needed someone who understood both technology and education. Someone who could evaluate proposals based on real classroom needs, not just profit margins. Dad's face had moved from white to red. Now see here. No, Dad. You see here. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's display system. Let me share some findings from our proposal review. The next 10 minutes were brutal. I methodically took apart Bennett Technologies' implementation plan, showing how it would devastate school budgets, highlighting the predatory service contracts, demonstrating the impact on smaller districts. And then there's the matter of these emails. New documents filled the screen. Communications between Bennett Technologies and department officials, attempted bribes, false claims in official submissions. Would anyone like to explain these? The board members were now staring at my father with horror. Corporate lawyers in the crowd were already reaching for their phones. "You can't do this," Dad spluttered. "We're your family." "Yes, we are," which makes this even more disappointing. I turned to address the whole room. The contract proposal, as written, has been rejected. However, the committee has prepared a conditional approval framework that got everyone's attention. Bennett Technologies can resubmit a revised proposal that meets the following criteria: fair pricing structures for all districts, flexible implementation timelines, reduced service contract terms, and most importantly, a requirement that 30% of the contract value be reinvested in teacher training and support programs. That would cut our profit margins in half. Someone from the financial department protested. Yes, I agreed. It would bring them in line with ethical business practices for educational contracts. You have 48 hours to decide if you want to resubmit under these terms, or we move to the next qualified bidder. The room erupted in chaos. Board members huddled in corners. Lawyers whispered urgently to executives. And my parents just stared at me like they'd never seen me before. All this time, Mom said softly, "You were doing exactly what you taught me," I finished for her. "Making an impact on education, just not the way you planned." James approached, a hint of a smile on his face. "You know what this means. If we accept these terms, you'll be overseeing our company's largest contract." "No," I corrected him. "I'll be ensuring that students like Maria Rodriguez get the educational tools they deserve, regardless of which company provides them." The next few weeks were intense. Bennett Technologies ultimately accepted the committee's terms. They really didn't have a choice once their ethical violations came to light. The revised contract was actually better for everyone. Schools got fair terms, teachers got support, and the company maintained its market position, just with more reasonable profits. My parents? That took longer to resolve. Dad showed up at Franklin High 3 weeks after the dinner. I was teaching my coding class when he appeared in the doorway. "Miss Bennett," Maria called out, "isn't that your dad? The tech company guy?" "Yes," I said, watching him take in the classroom, the engaged students, the work we were doing with limited resources. "He's here to learn." "Alexandra," he said when class ended, I was wrong. About teaching, about you, about a lot of things." "I know," I replied. "That's why I had to teach you differently." We didn't hug it out. Things weren't that simple. But over time, something interesting happened. My father started showing up at school board meetings. My mother began advocating for educational causes. They didn't fully understand my choices, but they started respecting them. The trust fund remained cut off, but I didn't care. My teacher's salary, supplemented by my department role, was enough. I had something better than wealth. I had purpose. A year later, I received a letter from Maria Rodriguez. She'd been accepted to MIT on a full scholarship. Her application bolstered by the coding projects she'd completed in my class, using the new technology her school could finally afford. I pinned her acceptance letter next to my Harvard Business School diploma, 2 different kinds of success, both equally valuable. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones we never planned to teach. My parents thought they were punishing me by cutting me off from their world of wealth and corporate power. Instead, they freed me to build something more meaningful, a bridge between that world and the one where real education happens, one student at a time. As for being just a teacher, well, sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one making the loudest noise. Sometimes it's the one with the red pen, the lesson plan, and the ability to make a real difference. Just ask my parents. They learned that lesson the hard way. But then again, those are always the lessons we remember best. The sound of dishes crashing to the floor was my first memory of La Maison. I was 5 years old, watching in horror as my father's career as a restaurateur came crashing down, literally and figuratively. That night, as he swept up broken plates and dreams, he told me something I'd never forget. Sophia, in this business, you either own the restaurant or the restaurant owns you. 25 years later, those words still echo in my mind as I stand in the kitchen of taste, watching my staff prepare for another busy night. They don't know I own this place. None of them do, except for my lawyer and accountant. To everyone else, I'm just Sophia Martinez, the quiet consultant who occasionally drops by to observe operations. My family? They think I'm a failed chef who couldn't hack it in culinary school. They're not entirely wrong about the culinary school part. I dropped out after 2 semesters. What they don't know is that I left because I was too busy buying my first failing restaurant and turning it around for a profit. You're throwing your life away, Mom had said when I quit school. Look at your sister Olivia, graduating medical school with honors, making something of herself. Ah, Olivia, the golden child, the successful surgeon who could do no wrong. Every family dinner became a celebration of her latest achievement, while my presence was tolerated with thinly veiled disappointment. But I had a plan. While they thought I was floundering, I was building an empire. One restaurant at a time, I acquired failing establishments, revitalized them, and either sold them for profit or kept them in my growing portfolio. I operated through a maze of holding companies and LLCs, keeping my name off any public documents. In the restaurant industry, anonymity was power. Taste was my crown jewel. When it came on the market 3 years ago, my family was devastated. It had been their favorite restaurant for special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, celebrations of Olivia's endless achievements. The previous owner, an old-school French chef, had run it into the ground with mismanagement and an outdated menu. I bought it through one of my companies, poured millions into renovations, and transformed it into the hottest reservation in the city. The irony of my family still dining here, never knowing it was mine, gave me a quiet satisfaction. Ms. Martinez. Miguel, my general manager, approached with a tablet in hand. The private party for tonight. The Martinez group? They've requested some special arrangements. My stomach tightened. Tonight was Mom's 60th birthday celebration, organized by Olivia, of course. I'd received the invitation 2 weeks ago, a reluctant inclusion that made it clear my presence was more obligation than desire. What kind of arrangements? I asked, though I already had a feeling I knew. They've requested 20 seats at the main table, but Miguel looked uncomfortable. They've asked for an additional small table near the kitchen for one guest. They said it's for family who's, more comfortable with the staff. The knife twisted deeper. Same old Olivia, finding ways to put me in my place. She probably told the restaurant it was for a socially awkward cousin or something equally dismissive. I see. I kept my voice neutral. And the main table arrangements? Miguel scrolled through his tablet. Dr. Olivia Martinez specified the seating. She's placed herself next to her husband Daniel at the head of the table, with their parents next to them. Then various aunts, uncles, cousins. He paused. She was very particular about the champagne service, only for the main table. Of course she was. Heaven forbid the family disappointment get a glass of champagne. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my hidden office above the kitchen, watching the security feeds as my family arrived. Mom and Dad first, Mom resplendent in a new designer dress. Then Olivia and Daniel, her surgeon husband, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all dressed to impress. I arrived last, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost less than Olivia's shoes. The hostess, following instructions she didn't know came from my sister, led me to the small table near the kitchen doors. "You can sit here," Olivia said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Where you belong." She smirked, adjusting her diamond necklace. "After all, you always said you wanted to work in restaurants." The rest of the family tittered politely at her joke. Mom looked embarrassed, but said nothing. Dad suddenly became very interested in his menu. I sat down at my lonely table, watching the champagne being poured at the main table, listening to the toasts and laughter. Each time the kitchen door swung open, I caught glimpses of my staff, working with the precision and excellence I demanded when I rebuilt this place. Miguel approached my table, looking nervous. He knew me as the consultant who signed his paychecks, but he'd been instructed by Olivia to treat me like an unwanted guest. "Can I get you some water?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him, then at my family celebrating without me, then back at the manager who had no idea he was speaking to the owner of not just this restaurant, but 5 others across the city. "Actually," I said, reaching for my phone, "I think it's time for some changes to tonight's service." The next few hours would teach my family a lesson about judging books by their covers. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally understand that success doesn't always wear a designer label or come with a medical degree. Little did they know, they were celebrating in my house. And in my house, everyone eventually learns their place at the table. I've learned something important in my years of running restaurants. Timing is everything. Whether you're plating a perfect souffle or destroying someone's illusions of superiority, it all comes down to the exact right moment. Sitting at my isolated table, I watched my family through new eyes. The way Olivia held court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with stories of her latest surgical triumph. How Mom beamed with pride while Dad nodded along, occasionally glancing at his phone to check stock prices. The cousins, aunts, and uncles all orbiting around them like satellites around a sun. 20 years of dismissal and condescension had led to this moment. But before I could make my move, Olivia decided to twist the knife one more time. "Oh, Miguel," she called out to my manager, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Could you please make sure my sister gets the special menu?" She threw me a smirk. "The one with prices removed. We wouldn't want her to worry about the cost." Miguel looked uncomfortable, knowing full well I signed his paychecks as the consultant. But he had his instructions from the party organizer. He brought me a menu, apologetic eyes meeting mine. "The special menu, as requested," he murmured. I opened it, noticing how Olivia watched expectantly, waiting for my humiliation. Instead, I smiled. "Miguel," I said clearly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "please bring me your wine list, the complete one, including the reserve cellar." Olivia's eyebrows shot up. The reserve cellar at Taste was legendary. Bottles ranging from $500 to $50,000, carefully curated over years. Access was by invitation only, something she tried and failed to obtain despite her status as a regular customer. "Safia," Mom called from the main table, her voice tight with embarrassment. "Don't be difficult. You know you can't afford." "Actually," I cut in, "I think I'll have the 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild." I turned to Miguel. "From the private collection in Cellar 3. The room went quiet. Even the regular diners knew about that bottle. $15,000 of liquid history, part of a collection that the mysterious owner of Taste had reportedly acquired at auction. Miguel's eyes widened slightly. He knew that only one person could authorize that bottle. "Right away, Ms. Martinez," he said, a new note of respect in his voice. "Sofia, stop this immediately," Dad snapped, his face reddening. "You can't just order." "I can," I said calmly, "and I will." In fact, I stood up, straightening my simple black dress. "Miguel, please open the reserve cellar. I think it's time we shared some of our best bottles with the entire party." Olivia shot up from her seat. "You can't do that. Do you have any idea how much those bottles cost? They'll add it to Mom's bill. And—" "No," I said softly. "They won't." I walked to the center of the room, where all eyes were now on me. 20 years of being the family disappointment, the failed chef, the cautionary tale. It all ended tonight. "You see, Olivia, there won't be any bill tonight. Not for the wine, not for the food, not for anything." I paused, letting the tension build. "Because you can't charge the owner for dining in their own restaurant." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in Olivia's head, trying to process what I'd just said. Mom's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls. Dad's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto his plate. "What? What are you talking about?" Olivia managed finally. I smiled, the same smile I'd practiced in boardrooms and business negotiations. "Let me make this very clear. I own Taste. Not just Taste, actually. I own Le Petit Jardin downtown, Marina Bay on the waterfront, Rustico in the financial district, Cloud 9 at the top of the Anderson building, and Bistro 55 in the theater district." Each name landed like a blow. They knew these restaurants, the most exclusive, most successful establishments in the city. Places where they'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, Olivia's promotions. Places they'd bragged about getting reservations to, never knowing their failed chef of a relative signed the checks. That's impossible," Mom whispered. "Those restaurants are owned by the Martinez Restaurant Group." "Yes," I agreed. "They are. Martinez Restaurant Group, founded by Sofia Martinez, incorporated 7 years ago." I turned to Miguel. "Could you please bring my laptop from my office? The one above the kitchen." As Miguel hurried off, I could see the reality starting to sink in for my family. Every dismissive comment, every condescending remark, every time they'd look down on my failure, it was all coming back to haunt them. But you dropped out of culinary school," Olivia sputtered. "You couldn't even finish your training." "I dropped out because I was too busy buying my first restaurant," I corrected her. "A failing Italian place in the business district. Bought it for pennies on the dollar, turned it around in 6 months, sold it for triple the investment. Used that money to buy 2 more failing restaurants. Rinse and repeat." Miguel returned with my laptop. I opened it, logging into the restaurant's systems. With a few keystrokes, every screen in the restaurant, the ones usually showing wine selections and daily specials, switched to display the Martinez Restaurant Group's holdings and financial statements. Current annual revenue across all properties, $35 million, I announced. Net profit last year, $12 million. Market value of the restaurant group, approximately $150 million. The numbers hit them like physical blows. I could see Dad, the former accountant, mouthing the figures in shock. Olivia had gone pale, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the edge of the table. "All those times you seated me by the kitchen, I continued, my voice carrying in the hushed room. All those times you made jokes about my restaurant career. I was signing your checks. Every bottle of wine you ordered to impress your friends. Every special table you requested. Every time you dropped my name to get a reservation. You were trading on my reputation without even knowing it. The look on their faces was almost worth 20 years of condescension. Almost. But I wasn't done yet. Because timing, as I said, is everything. And I had saved my best course for last. The thing about revenge, like fine wine, is that it's best served at precisely the right temperature. Too cold, and you lose the subtle notes. Too warm, and it overwhelms the palate. As I stood in my restaurant, watching my family process the revelation of my success, I felt a strange sense of calm. The expensive bottle of wine arrived, and I gestured for Miguel to pour glasses for everyone, even at my former lonely table by the kitchen. A toast, I said, lifting my glass, to assumptions and to their consequences. Olivia remained frozen. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the shock on her face. Mom kept opening and closing her mouth, like a fish out of water. Dad, ever the accountant, had pulled out his phone and was frantically Googling the Martinez restaurant group. But why? Mom finally managed. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you? I laughed softly. When would that have been appropriate? During the family dinners where you only talked about Olivia's accomplishments. Or maybe during those lovely holiday gatherings where you introduced me as your daughter who works in restaurants, like it was some kind of terminal illness. We were worried about you, Dad protested weakly, still staring at his phone. We thought you were struggling. No, I corrected him. You wanted me to struggle. You needed me to struggle, because my failure made Olivia's success shine brighter. Olivia finally found her voice. That's not fair. Not fair? I cut her off. Let's talk about fair, dear sister. I pulled out my tablet and pulled up some records. Let's discuss the 12 times you called my office, not knowing it was mine, demanding special treatment at my restaurants, or the time you tried to get my manager fired at Le Petit Jardin because he wouldn't give you a table without a reservation. The color drained from her face. That was, I didn't. Or perhaps, I continued, my voice steel wrapped in silk. We should discuss the review you posted online about Marina Bay last month. The one where you claimed to know the owner personally and threatened to have the chef fired. A gasp went around the table. Olivia had bragged about that review, about how she'd shown that uppity restaurant its place. I didn't know it was yours, she whispered. That's exactly the point. You didn't know, but you acted that way anyway. All of you did. I looked around the table at my assembled family. You treated service workers, restaurant staff, and anyone you thought was beneath you with contempt. And all the while, you were dining in my establishments, enjoying my success, and benefiting from my hard work. I nodded to Miguel, who disappeared into the kitchen. A moment later, he returned with a team of servers, each carrying folders. Inside these folders, I announced, you'll find some interesting documents. Financial records of every meal you've enjoyed in my restaurants, every special favor you've requested, every time you've dropped my name or claimed connections to get what you wanted. The servers distributed the folders. Hands shaking, my relatives opened them. You'll also find, I continued, receipts for every Christmas bonus I've anonymously given to the staff you've berated. Every tip I've added to make up for the ones you've skipped. Every repair bill for the things you've broken during your entitled tantrums. Mom was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. But I wasn't finished. And finally, I said, my voice carrying in the silent restaurant, you'll find lifetime bans from all Martinez Restaurant Group properties. Effective immediately. The explosion was immediate. You can't do this, Olivia shrieked, standing up so fast her chair toppled backward. We're family. Family? I raised an eyebrow. Was it family when you seated me by the kitchen tonight? Was it family when you mocked my career choice for 20 years? Was it family when you treated my staff, people who depend on me for their livelihoods, like they were beneath you? Safia, please. Mom pleaded. We can fix this. We didn't know. That's right, Mom. You didn't know. You never bothered to find out. You were too busy planning parties to celebrate Olivia's every minor achievement to notice that your other daughter was building an empire. I turned to Miguel. Please escort them out, all of them, and make sure their bans are implemented across all properties immediately. As security began to move forward, Dad stood up. Wait, the bill, for tonight. Consider it my last gift, I said coldly. A final meal in one of my restaurants. Though I doubt you'll enjoy the taste of humble pie. I watched as they were escorted out, my proud family reduced to shocked whispers and backward glances. Olivia tried to protest one last time at the door, but the sight of additional security guards convinced her to leave quietly. Once they were gone, I addressed the other diners, who had watched the scene unfold with rapt attention. I apologize for the disruption, I said. Your meals tonight are on the house. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening. The applause that followed was unexpected but warming. I nodded to Miguel to bring me the expensive bottle of wine at my small table by the kitchen. My favorite spot, as it turned out. The place where I could hear the rhythm of my restaurant, feel its heartbeat. Over the next few weeks, the calls and messages poured in. Apologies, explanations, justifications. Mom left tearful voicemails about how proud she was, how she'd always believed in me. She hadn't. Olivia's messages swung between anger and attempted reconciliation. Dad sent lengthy emails analyzing my business success, offering unsolicited advice about tax strategies. I ignored them all. 6 months later, I opened my newest restaurant, a small, intimate place called Second Chances. The concept was simple. We hired people who needed a fresh start, trained them in the culinary arts, and gave them the opportunity I'd made for myself. On opening night, as I stood in the kitchen watching my new staff prepare for service, Miguel appeared at my side. Your family is outside, he said quietly. Your sister made a reservation under a different name. They're asking to speak with you. I thought about it for a moment, remembered the lonely girl at the table by the kitchen, remembered the years of dismissal and doubt. Then I thought about the empire I'd built, the success I'd achieved, the lives I was changing. Tell them, I said, tying on my apron and picking up a knife, that the owner is busy cooking, and remind them about their lifetime ban. Miguel smiled and headed out. I turned to my new staff, former addicts, ex-cons, abuse survivors, all getting their second chance. All right, everyone, I called out. Time to show the world what you can do. Remember what I always say. They joined in, voices strong and proud. In this business, you either own the restaurant or the restaurant owns you. I smiled, feeling the familiar heat of the kitchen, the energy of circus about to begin. This was my empire, built on hard work, skill, and the determination to prove everyone wrong. And the best revenge wasn't serving it cold. It was serving it perfectly prepared, beautifully plated, and completely out of reach. The kitchen doors swung open and another night of service began. In my restaurants, everyone eventually learns their place. Some just learn it the hard way. As for my family, they still try to get reservations at my restaurant sometimes, using different names or having friends make bookings for them. Each time, they're politely turned away. Each time, they learn again that success, like the best meals, is sweetest when earned. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose how you deal with them. I chose to build an empire they couldn't enter, create success they couldn't claim, and find happiness they couldn't diminish. And every night, I still sit at that table by the kitchen, drinking expensive wine and listening to the symphony of a well-run restaurant. It turns out the best seat in the house was the one they thought was a punishment. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be cold. Sometimes it just needs to be served with perfect timing, impeccable presentation, and a side of lifetime ban.